The interrogation room smelled like fear and recycled air. Captain Vex Morian sat across from the human, studying her with the same analytical precision he'd used to dissect 1,000 other species across the galactic concordate. She looked breakable. Soft pink skin, no natural armor plating, no venomous glands visible through bioscans, no enhanced musculature. Her file said her name was Kira Chen, age 27. Occupation listed as freight hauler. Boring. Predictable. Harmless. Except 3 of his best security officers were in the medical wing right now, and one of them might never regain full use of his primary manipulator appendage. So, Vex began, tapping one claw against the metal table between them. The sound echoed in the small space like a death knell. You want to tell me what happened on docking bay 12? Kira looked up at him with those strange human eyes, brown and depthless. She'd been crying earlier. He could see the dried salt tracks on her cheeks. But now she just looked tired. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit amused. I defended myself, she said simply. Her voice carried a rasp, probably from all that screaming she'd done when they'd initially detained her. Your goons attacked me first. My security personnel, Vex corrected coldly, were performing a routine contraband inspection of your vessel. You assaulted them. After they tore apart 6 months of cargo and threatened to space me for transporting unlicensed medicinal compounds. Kira leaned back in her chair, the restraints around her wrists clinking softly. Compounds that, by the way, are only illegal because your concordate wants to monopolize healthcare across 15 systems. But sure, let's call it assault. Vex felt his throat sac inflate slightly, an involuntary display of irritation. Humans. They always had opinions. Always had excuses. Always thought they were clever enough to talk their way out of consequences. The bite patterns we documented on Officer Thrain's arm don't match any registered species in our database, Vex continued, pulling up a holographic display between them. The 3-dimensional rendering of the wound rotated slowly, showing deep puncture marks arranged in a distinctive arch. Our medical team is baffled. The pressure required to penetrate Calvaxian dermal plating is substantial. Yet somehow, with your soft little mouth and those tiny bone protrusions you call teeth, you managed it. Kira smiled then. Not a friendly smile, not a nervous smile. The kind of smile that said she knew something he didn't, and she was going to enjoy watching him figure it out. You guys did a full workup on humans before admitting us to the concordate, right? She asked, voice dripping with enough sarcasm to corrode hull plating. Read all the documentation? Studied the biology? Or did you just look at us and think, oh, how cute? They're like the Pluvian mice. Let's pat them on their heads and give them the worst trade routes in the sector. Vex's secondary eyelids flickered. We are familiar with human physiology. Are you, though? Kira leaned forward as much as her restraints allowed. Because if you were, you'd know that humans aren't apex predators by accident. We didn't claw our way to the top of our food chain by being gentle. We did it by being absolutely relentless, stubbornly insane, and way more dangerous than we look. A human cannot generate the bite force necessary to bite through Calvaxian plating. You're right. Under normal circumstances. Kira's smile widened, showing those small white teeth that had caused so much confusion. But see, here's the thing about humans that your fancy database probably didn't mention. We have this fun little biological quirk called hysterical strength. Adrenaline response. When we're threatened, genuinely threatened, our bodies stop caring about safety limiters. We can lift vehicles off trapped children. We can run on broken legs. We can tear through metal with our bare hands if we're scared or angry enough. She paused, letting that sink in. And Captain, I was terrified. Your officers had me on the ground, one holding a plasma cutter to my throat while the others laughed about which black market organ broker would pay the most for fresh human parts. So yeah, I bit one of them. I bit him as hard as I possibly could because I wanted to live, and my brain decided that regulations and physical limitations could go straight to hell. Vex felt something cold settle in his gut. He pulled up another file, this one marked with concordate intelligence seals. Security footage from the docking bay played on a smaller screen only he could see. He watched the scene unfold, watched his officers, who he'd personally assigned, who he'd trusted, do exactly what Kira described. Watched them laugh, watched them threaten, watched the human woman who'd been doing nothing but legally transporting medicine to a colony world suddenly fight for her life with a desperation that bordered on feral. The official report had claimed she'd attacked unprovoked, had said she was trafficking weapons, had painted her as a threat to station security. The official report had been a complete fabrication. They were going to kill me, Kira said quietly, reading his expression. And you were going to let them get away with it because who cares about one human freight hauler, right? We're fragile. We're expendable. We're the newest species in your little club, so we should be grateful for whatever scraps you throw our way, and keep our mouths shut when your people decide to supplement their income by harvesting our organs." Vex closed his eyes slowly, processing the weight of what he'd just learned. His station, his officers, his responsibility. And he'd nearly executed an innocent woman for the crime of not dying quietly. "The medical compounds," he asked, his voice rougher than before. "Where were they going?" "Colony World Epsilon 7. Mining settlement. They've got an outbreak of Kellner's syndrome. The Concordat refused to ship treatments because the colony can't afford official pharmaceutical prices. So independent haulers like me run it instead, at cost. Because those are people dying out there. Real people with families and lives and dreams." Kira's voice cracked slightly. "I wasn't going to let your corrupt officers space me for trying to save lives." The silence that followed was heavy enough to generate its own gravity well. Vex stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh metallic shriek. He moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the control panel. "The officers involved have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation," he said without turning around. "You'll be compensated for damages to your cargo and vessel, and I'll personally ensure your shipment reaches Epsilon 7. "That's it?" Kira's voice cut through the room like a vibroblade. "That's all I get? Administrative leave? They tried to murder me, and you're giving them a vacation?" Vex turned slowly, meeting her gaze. There was something burning in those human eyes now, something that made his combat instincts prickle uncomfortably. "What would you have me do?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I want justice." Kira leaned forward again, and despite the restraints, despite being trapped in an interrogation room on a station where she had no allies and no legal standing, she somehow looked dangerous. "I want every single being on this station to know what your officers tried to do. I want an investigation that actually means something. And I want you to ask yourself how many other humans, how many other freight haulers from weak species, have disappeared on your watch because you assumed we were too fragile to matter." Something shifted in the room then. Some fundamental rebalancing of power dynamics. Vex had walked in here expecting to process a violent criminal. Instead, he was facing someone who'd just held up a mirror to his own failures, and the reflection was ugly enough to strip paint. "You could have killed Officer Thrain," Vex pointed out. "The bite placement. It was close to a major artery. If you'd shifted your jaw position by even a few centimeters, he would have bled out in seconds." Kira met his eyes steadily. "I know, but you didn't. No." She smiled again, bitter and sharp. "Because unlike your officers, I'm not a killer. I'm just someone who refuses to die quietly." Vex studied her for a long moment, recalculating every assumption he'd made about humans, about fragility, about what it meant to be dangerous. The bite pattern that didn't match the database suddenly made perfect sense. You couldn't categorize desperation, couldn't file survival instinct under neat taxonomic classifications, couldn't predict what a cornered creature would do when fighting for its life, regardless of how soft or breakable it looked. "I'm releasing you," he said finally. "With full apologies from Concordat Station Authority. Your ship will be repaired and refueled at our expense. The medical compounds will be delivered as promised. And the investigation will be thorough, public, and comprehensive." Vex moved to release her restraints personally, watching as she rubbed circulation back into her wrists. "I don't expect you to forgive what happened here, but I give you my word that it won't happen again, not on my station, not to any hauler." Kira stood slowly, testing her legs. She was barely chest height to him, this small human with her soft skin and fragile bones, but standing there in that interrogation room, she somehow filled the entire space with presence. "Words are cheap, Captain," she said, "but I'll accept them as a down payment on action. Just know that if I hear about another human going missing on this station, if I hear about another independent hauler getting spaced for doing the right thing, I'll be back. And next time, I won't aim for the arm." She walked past him toward the door, then paused at the threshold. "Oh, and Captain, you might want to update that database of yours. Add a note next to humans. Something like fragile, but only until they decide not to be. Bite force variable, subject to emotional state. Approach with caution and basic decency." Then she was gone, leaving Vex alone in the interrogation room with his thoughts and the slowly rotating hologram of a bite mark that proved humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had predicted. 3 weeks later, Kira Chen was back on Concordat Station Alpha, and Captain Vex Morian was honestly surprised to see her alive. The investigation had gone public, exactly as he'd promised. Officer Thrain and his accomplices were currently awaiting trial in a detention facility 3 systems away. The scandal had ripped through Concordat leadership like a plasma fire through oxygen-rich atmosphere. Turns out, when you actually looked at the numbers, dozens of independent haulers had vanished over the past 2 years. Most of them human, all of them transporting goods that undercut official Concordat monopolies. And now, Kira Chen was standing in his office, looking far too calm for someone who'd just painted a target on her back the size of a small moon. "You have a death wish," Vex said by way of greeting. "Or you're the stupidest human I've ever met. I'm genuinely unsure which." Kira dropped into the chair across from his desk without being invited. She looked different. Still small, still soft-looking, but there was something harder in her eyes now. Something that had crystallized during those hours in the interrogation room. "Nice to see you too, Captain. Love what you've done with the place. Very authoritarian chic." She gestured vaguely at his office, which looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks ago. "I'm here because we need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. Your compensation was processed. Your ship is repaired. The investigation is ongoing. Unless you're here to press additional charges, which I would fully support, we're done. See? That's where you're wrong." Kira pulled out a data chip and slid it across his desk. "Because while you were busy cleaning house here on Alpha Station, I was doing some digging of my own. And guess what I found?" Vex regarded the data chip like it might explode. "With humans, that was always a possibility. Enlighten me. Your little organ harvesting operation? It wasn't contained to Alpha Station. It's bigger. Way bigger. 17 stations, 4 different sectors, all running the same scam. Target independent haulers, especially from newly admitted species, steal their cargo, kill them, sell the bodies. It's been running for at least 5 years. And the profit margins are substantial enough that someone very high up in Concordat leadership has to be involved." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Vex picked up the data chip slowly, his claws clicking against its surface. "Where did you get this information? Does it matter?" Kira leaned back, studying him. "What matters is that I have it. Names, dates, transaction records, shipping manifests. Everything you need to burn this operation to the ground and take down everyone involved." "Why bring this to me?" Vex asked carefully. "You don't know me. You don't trust me. For all you know, I'm part of this. Are you?" The question hung in the air between them like a suspended blade. Vex met her eyes steadily. "No. Then that's why I'm here." Kira's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not an idiot. I know what happens to whistleblowers. I know that bringing this information to official channels means I'm going to spend the rest of my probably very short life looking over my shoulder. But here's the thing, Captain. I can't unknow what I know. I can't pretend I didn't see the pattern. And I sure as hell can't sit on evidence while more people die." Vex inserted the data chip into his terminal, pulling up file after file of meticulously documented evidence. It was comprehensive, damning, enough to trigger a Concordat-wide investigation that would shake the organization to its foundations. It was also enough to get Kira killed before the week was out. "This is insane," he muttered, scanning through transaction records. "This level of organization, the resources required, the number of personnel involved. You're talking about a conspiracy that reaches into the High Council itself." "Yep." Kira popped the P with deliberate cheerfulness. "Fun, right? Really makes you question all your life choices. They'll come after you. The moment you make this public, every corrupt officer, every dirty politician, every black market organ broker in the sector will want you dead." "Probably." Kira shrugged. But Vex could see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. "But here's the thing about humans that your database definitely doesn't mention. We're spite-driven. We run on coffee, sarcasm, and the sheer stubborn refusal to let bad people win. Someone tried to kill me and make it look justified. They failed. Now I'm going to make them regret that failure for however long I've got left." Vex leaned back in his chair, regarding this small, fragile, absolutely terrifying human with something approaching respect. "You understand that even if we expose this, even if we bring everyone involved to justice, it won't change the fundamental problems. The Concordat is built on exploitation. Weak species get the worst deals, the worst trade routes, the worst protections. That's not a bug. That's a feature. I know." Kira's voice was quiet now, stripped of its earlier bravado. "But maybe, just maybe, if we make enough noise, if we show that there are consequences for treating people as disposable, things might start to shift. Slowly. Incrementally. But shift nonetheless." "That's optimistic to the point of delusion." "Yeah, well, humans are good at that too." She smiled, and despite everything, it was genuine. "We looked at the stars and said we're going there. We looked at diseases that killed millions and said not anymore. We looked at tyranny and oppression throughout our history and kept fighting, kept pushing, kept refusing to accept that this is just how things are. It's kind of our whole thing. Vex was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then he made a decision that would probably end his career and possibly his life. All right, I'm in, Kira blinked. Just like that? Just like that. He pulled up his secure communications array, fingers already flying across the holographic interface. I joined the Concordat because I believed in what it claimed to stand for. Unity, protection, fair governance across species lines. If that's all a lie, if we're just another corrupt empire exploiting the weak, then it needs to burn. I'd rather go down fighting for something real than live comfortably in a system built on bodies. Wow. Kira looked genuinely surprised. That was almost inspirational. You rehearsed that speech? Shut up and help me route this through channels that won't immediately get us both killed. They worked through the night, building a distribution network that would simultaneously release the evidence to every major news outlet, every independent journalism collective, every opposition political group across Concordat space. It had to be fast. It had to be comprehensive. One leak, one warning to the wrong person, and the whole thing would collapse. Around hour 4, Kira leaned back and rubbed her eyes. Can I ask you something? If you must. Why did you believe me? Back in that interrogation room, you saw the security footage, sure, but you could have still prosecuted me. Self-defense claims don't always hold up, especially when the victim is from a powerful species and the defendant is nobody. So why? Vex was quiet for a moment, considering. The bite pattern, he said finally. It kept bothering me. Not because it didn't match the database, because it was so precise. You could have torn out Thrain's throat. Should have, by any reasonable survival calculation. But you didn't. You hurt him exactly enough to escape, and no more. That takes control. Discipline. It suggested someone who was fighting to survive, not to kill. And people fighting to survive are usually telling the truth. Plus, you know, the security footage showing your guys being absolute monsters? That helped, Vex admitted dryly. But the bite pattern was what made me look at the footage in the first place. Huh. Kira processed that. So basically, I'm alive because I have good jaw control and you're more observant than the average authoritarian military commander. Great. That's a comforting thought. Your survival instincts are genuinely terrible. You know that, right? Oh, absolutely. But terrible survival instincts have gotten humanity pretty far, so I'm going to keep rolling with it. Hour 6. The distribution network was ready. One button press, and everything would go live simultaneously across 200 different platforms. No way to stop it. No way to contain it. Just pure, unfiltered truth dumped into the public sphere like a toxin into a pristine water supply. Vex's claw hovered over the confirmation key. Last chance to walk away. You give me that data chip, you disappear, you live a nice, quiet life somewhere far from here. No one needs to know you were involved. You'd take the fall alone? I'm old. I've had a career. You're young. You have time to do other things, better things. I'm old. I've had a career. You're young. You have time to do other things, better things. Kira reached over and pressed the key herself, her small human finger barely making a sound against the interface. Too late. We're committed now. Besides, I look terrible and quiet. Really washes out my complexion. The files began uploading, spreading across the network like a viral infection. Within minutes, alerts were pinging across every major station in Concordat space. News organizations scrambled to verify and report. Opposition groups seized on the evidence. Social networks exploded with outrage, analysis, demands for accountability. And somewhere in the dark corners of Concordat leadership, very powerful people realized they'd been exposed and started making plans to eliminate the source of their problems. Security alert, Vex's terminal announced calmly. Unauthorized armed personnel approaching command sector. Estimate 30 hostiles. Heavy weapons detected. Kira stood up slowly. That was fast. They must have had kill teams on standby. Vex armed his personal defense system, watching as bulkhead doors began sealing throughout the sector. Standard procedure for covering up large-scale corruption. Eliminate the witnesses, destroy the evidence, claim it was a tragic terrorist attack. Wow, you guys are thorough. I'd be impressed if I wasn't about to die. Kira looked around the office, clearly calculating escape routes and finding none. So, any brilliant last-minute plans? Or are we just going out in a blaze of sarcastic glory? Vex smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. It was the smile of a career military officer who'd seen combat on a dozen different worlds and knew exactly how much damage he could do before going down. Oh, I have a plan. These bastards want to kill us quietly? We're going to make the noisiest last stand in Concordate history. By the time we're done, every station in the sector will know exactly who tried to silence us and why. He opened a communication channel, broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously. Attention all personnel on Concordate Station Alpha. This is Captain Vex Morian. Command sector is under attack by forces attempting to suppress evidence of large-scale corruption and murder. All available security respond. All civilians shelter in place. And to whoever sent these killers, know this. The information is already out. Killing us accomplishes nothing except proving our case. That should buy us maybe 3 minutes, Kira observed. What's step 2? Step 2 is we make them work for it. Vex handed her a plasma pistol from his emergency weapons cache. You know how to use this? Point the dangerous end at bad guys. Pull the trigger. I think I can manage. Good enough. The doors exploded inward in a shower of molten metal. Armed figures poured through. Professional mercenaries by the look of their gear and movements. They weren't here to arrest anyone. They were here to erase mistakes. Vex opened fire immediately, his military training taking over. Beside him, Kira did the same, her shots less precise but filled with enough angry determination to make up for it. The office became a war zone, plasma bolts scorching walls, equipment exploding, the smell of ozone and burning materials filling the air. You know what? Kira shouted over the chaos, dropping behind cover as return fire chewed through the furniture around her. I take it back about the quiet life. This is way more interesting. You're completely insane, Vex replied, taking down another mercenary with a clean headshot. Yeah, but at least I'm consistently insane. That counts for something. They held the office for 4 minutes before reinforcements arrived. Station security forces loyal to Vex pouring into the command sector. The mercenaries, realizing they'd lost the element of surprise and were now vastly outnumbered, attempted to retreat. Most didn't make it. When the smoke cleared, Kira was sitting on the floor of Vex's destroyed office, bleeding from a dozen minor wounds, covered in soot and debris, laughing like she'd just heard the funniest joke in the universe. We survived, she gasped between fits of slightly hysterical laughter. They sent 30 armed killers after us, and we survived. Oh man, they're going to be so mad. Vex, equally battered but still standing, couldn't help but laugh too. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was the most human thing he'd ever witnessed. The investigation has gone viral, his second-in-command reported, surveying the carnage. Every major outlet is covering it. Protests are erupting on 6 different worlds. The High Council has called an emergency session. Captain, you just started a revolution. We, Vex corrected, looking at Kira. We started a revolution. Kira grinned up at him, bloody and defiant and absolutely unbroken. Guess fragile is relative, huh? Guess so. Later, much later, after medical treatment and debriefings and the beginning of what would be months of testimony and trials, Vex found Kira on one of the station's observation decks, staring out at the stars. They're calling you the Catalyst, he said, settling beside her. The human who brought down the Concordate's shadow government. They're calling you the honorable traitor, Kira countered. The officer who chose truth over loyalty. We should start a band. We've already got great marketing. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ships come and go. What now? Vex asked finally. Now? Kira smiled. Now we make sure it sticks. Make sure the people who died before we caught on didn't die for nothing. Make sure the next human hauler, the next weak species trying to make an honest living, doesn't have to bite through armored plating just to survive. That's going to take years, maybe decades. Then I guess we'd better get started. She turned to face him. You up for it? Long-term partnership fighting corruption and exploitation? It doesn't pay well, and the retirement plan is terrible. Vex extended his hand, human style. I suppose someone has to keep you from getting killed. Might as well be me, Kira shook it firmly. Partners then. The fragile human and the honorable traitor. We're going to be insufferable. We already are. Perfect. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the galaxy shifted slightly, adjusting to the presence of a small human woman who'd refused to die quietly, and a career officer who'd remembered what honor actually meant. They'd called her fragile. They'd underestimated her completely. They'd assumed soft meant weak and small meant insignificant. They'd learned otherwise. The hard way, with bite marks to prove it. And the revolution they'd started was only just beginning. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.